And so in the end, the reason why I joined AMP is like, I just wanted to be a part of a team that only cared about one thing, which is developer experience. We don't care if we have to use a model from Anthropic for the primary agent and a model from OpenAI for the deep thinking agent. So I think, in the end, it's like, where do we fit in? You need an agent who codes, right? And you're going to pick Claude Code or Cursor or Windsurf or Devin or AMP or Codex, and then your team's going to get good at that. And we just want to provide the best developer experience possible. And we ship like 47 times a day, and we all use the tool. And it's going to be a battle, though. I'm not going to pretend that we know some secret sauce, but it makes it fun.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Deployed. We're joined today by Ryan Carson, who recently became builder in residence at AMP, which is the coding agent built by the team at Sourcegraph. Ryan's a multi-time founder. He was working on DevRel for AI products at Intel, and he was also working on a side project. And basically what happened was the founders at AMP asked him to come join and work on that side project full time, but make AMP better in the process. So it's this really interesting conversation about both what AMP is, what they're doing to differentiate it. There's a really honest take from Ryan about how they've worked through things like evals and how hard it's been to figure out the right ones. But then he also talks a bunch about his personal coding practices, his passion to help people learn how to build with coding agents, and just all the good things that's going to come from that. So for anybody who's hands-on in this space, this is a great chat, both about building coding agents and working with them. And I think you're really going to enjoy hearing from Ryan. Thanks for tuning in. All right, Ryan, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us. I'm super excited for you to say hello to our world. I've been fortunate to know Ryan for a long time, but Ryan, tell me about who you are. What are you working on? I think you'll probably get into a lot of stuff, but you've been a founder. You've done a bunch of stuff in this space over the years. Now you're building at AMP. What's going on? Tell us about your world.
Well, it's fun to be here. It's fun to be chatting to you. For all of you listening and watching, I have a ton of respect for Ian as a person, but also just super excited about what Free Play is doing. It feels like we're at the beginning of the world when it comes to evals, and everybody is realizing everything is evals. So I'm excited to be here. So I have kind of a weird arc into what I do now, but I find it interesting, but it's probably because it's my life. So I'll give everyone the kind of 60-second version. But started off, grew up in Colorado Springs, and I thought I was going to be a pastor, actually. But then my dad brought home an Apple IIe computer, and I was like, wait a minute, what's that? And so ended up studying computer science, and then just wanted to sort of throw the wild card into my life and move somewhere totally different. And I moved to England. And I got a job as a web developer, and then realized, you know what? I like building products. I think I could run my own company, and built my own company at night while I was a web developer, and shipped my first company, basically solo founder. And then I was fortunate to have that business acquired after I think it was a couple of years. And then I really realized I'm deeply passionate about education and empowering people with code. It kind of goes back to my roots, where I realized, you know what gives you real power and real agency is learning code. It allows you to build, and allows you to build wealth, and allows you to change things. And so sort of fell into, okay, let's teach people how to code. That's my mission in life. And basically did that, built two companies around that. The second one grew to a decent size, raised a bunch of venture capital, scaled the team to 100 plus people, and ended up teaching 1 million people how to code. And that's some of my proudest work, is doing that. And then took a couple of years off, and then realized, wow, I don't know anything about silicon. So I'm going to go do an adult internship at Intel, and learned how silicon works, learned how enterprise works, ended up setting up their DevRel motion and their influencer motion, and then fell back in love with code. And that's ultimately why I'm here. I'm now a full stack engineer, as well as a builder and a founder. And it's been a wild ride.
That's cool. And you're at AMP. You've got a really weird title, builder in residence. Tell us, for people that don't know AMP, tell us quick about AMP. What's the mission? And then tell us about your weird job.
Yeah. I love that. I love that you think it's weird, because I remember when I joined, I was like, this is what I want my title to be. And they're like, that's weird. Okay. So while I was at Intel, I'm really a founder. Like I've built companies. I love shipping products and solving problems. But after Treehouse was acquired, I just didn't have the idea. I didn't know what I was going to build. And so then joined Intel, learned. And then while I was at Intel, I'm best friends with my sisters. There's three of them. Ian knows this, but we have a phone call every week. We meet up every year. They're amazing. And so it was about 2-3 years ago that my oldest sister said, "Hey, y'all, I think I'm going to get divorced." And it was like, wow, this is tough. Support her through it. And then a year later, my younger sister got divorced, and I just realized, gosh, divorce is really painful and hard. It seems like it's worse than it should be. Why? And then I just started reading books and studying divorce. And my kids freaked out for a minute. "Why is there books about divorce on your table, Dad? What's happening?" And I said, "Don't worry, I'm just like becoming a divorce nerd." And I live in a small town, and I would get divorce books from the library, and I had to like hide them underneath my arm. So, so anyway, became an expert because I thought I want to somehow make this less painful for people. And so on this night, I started using ChatGPT to code, right? Because this is right when LLMs really hit. And I was like, okay, I can build again. I haven't shipped code for a long time because I've had CTOs and VP of Eng and all this amazing team, but I haven't shipped in a long time. So I taught myself TypeScript and, full stack TypeScript and Next.js, and then built this basic solution. Like, okay, here is a AI divorce lawyer agent for Connecticut, where I live. Walks you through the divorce process, fills out all your forms, answers all the questions, that you don't need a lawyer for. And so I built this and then realized, okay, evals are important. You can't have the agents tell everybody anything they want. And then fell in love with coding, and I was using Cursor like hours and hours every night, right? So I'd finish at Intel and I'd code till 1 a.m.
That story is common these days. I'm hearing that from a lot of founders.
Well, it's neat because I think all the CEOs are coding again, that, at least the smart ones. And so then it was like, okay, I really like this. And then at some point I felt like I had done what I need to do at Intel, and I was ready for, my next adventure. And this business I had built on the side, it's called Untangle. It's in basically private beta. It's not quite launched yet, but I was ready to either go raise money and just solo found it, or I could go, think about joining somewhere. Someone said AMP, and I was like, I haven't tried AMP. I tried it and I was like, wow, this is a good agent. Like, this is really, really good. What's going on here? There's no model selector. You don't have to accept the diffs. They're very opinionated about the product. And I just started, I DM'd the founder and I was like, I love this about it. I love there's no model selector. I hate that you applied the diffs without asking me. What is your deal? And Quinn and I started talking a lot. He's the CEO founder. And then eventually he said, well, why don't you come here and build Untangle, and join the team, help us make AMP better, build Untangle while you do it in public. And I was like, it's hard to say no to that.
So you are truly like just getting to build a startup, but, working for AMP, like dog fooding, helping the team make the product better.
Yep. It's a blast. I get to work here from home. There's an amazing fun team. I'm given tons of freedom and power. So it's really ideal. And it kind of ticks the box that I have of like, how can we empower millions of people to build, right? And obviously agents are the way.
Yeah. And tell us more, like, for people that haven't used AMP, like you were like, oh, I was living in Cursor and then I started using AMP, got excited. Like, how should people think about where AMP fits in this landscape? Everybody's probably used Cursor. They've tried to write code with ChatGPT, Claude codes everywhere. Like, where does AMP fit in? What's it good at?
So really everybody needs to pick their agent, right? So you might be in an IDE that you like, whether it's VS Code or Cursor or Windsurf, or something else, JetBrains. And then, if you're in a Cursor, you're probably going to be using the Cursor agent, and it's very good. I mean, I built most of Untangle with Cursor. And then if you're in, a Windsurf, you're obviously going to be using their agent, right? But what everybody realized is Claude Code came out, right? And as we all know, Claude Code was built by a very small team inside of Anthropic to actually build a lot of what we think of as Claude. And then everybody realized, oh, you can run agents on the command line. And actually, maybe they're better because they deeply understand Bash. They are very fast. There's less cruft, like there's less UI that you have to do. And so everyone started using Claude Code. And I'll say it was, I think, genius that they basically said, hey, you could use all you can eat for $200 a month. And everybody was like, oh, I get unlimited tokens basically.
Not going to get cut off when I hit the ceiling. Yeah.
Yeah. So they basically bought this huge adoption and they have a great tool. So that's why most people that you hear about use Claude Code now. So I think you can think of AMP as we're competing primarily with Claude Code, I would say, right? And well, why would you choose AMP over Claude Code? It's interesting because we're all figuring this out. Okay, there's labs, right? You've got Anthropic, you've got OpenAI, you've got DeepMind, and of course, Claude Code is going to be good, but it's tied to Anthropic's models, right? Of course, Codex is great, but it's going to be tied to OpenAI's models, right? And so, in the end, the reason why I joined AMP is I just wanted to be a part of a team that was that only cared about one thing, which is developer experience. We don't care if we have to use a model from Anthropic for the primary agent and a model from OpenAI for the deep thinking agent, right? We can just optimize. So I think, in the end, it's where do we fit in? It's you need an agent who codes, right? And you're going to pick, it's probably going to be Claude Code or Cursor or Windsurf or Devin or AMP or Codex. And then your team's going to get good at that. And we just want to provide the best developer experience possible. And we ship 47 times a day and we all use the tool. And it's going to be a battle though. There's no, I'm not going to pretend that we know some secret sauce that
one of the hottest battles in a while.
But it makes it fun.
And I don't know, you're talking about developer experience being the differentiator. You also, kind of mentioned you're coming off the bench yourself. You haven't been writing a lot of code recently. You've talked elsewhere about PMs needing to write code and how fun it is that people that really haven't been developers ever can really be dangerous now. Talk to us about what that looks like in your world. What's AMP's role in that? If it's operating at the command line, it's a different experience than kind of the new folks on the front door. How do you think about just the way this ecosystem is changing and what tools need to look like for the vibe coders that maybe aren't true engineers?
It's interesting because we didn't even talk about Lovable and Bolt, right? Or V0. So there's a whole nother part of this ecosystem, which is I just want to go from zero to something. And I think, Bolt and Lovable and V0 are really good options for that. If you truly are a vibe coder, you don't have any computer science experience, you've never written code, absolutely use Lovable, use Bolt, use V0. They absolutely are awesome, right? You can even, pick any of the other tools as well, but those are great. And I think people should use them. I think then the question is when you have a repo, a real repo, 100,000 lines of TypeScript, 200,000 lines of Java, what tool are you going to use? And I think AMP is 100% focused on professional developers. So we're putting our flag in the sand of, okay, we want to build a tool for people, who are engineers. Not because we're snobby, not because we think that's better. It's just we think it's important to pick, and we think we can compete by delivering the best developer experience. And there's kind of a taste element to that. But it's going to be a wild ride, and it's not clear who's going to win this thing.
Oh, that's cool. I mean, I think being opinionated, that's a great start.
But to answer your question, though, there is some things even engineers are doing that I think, whether you're a vibe coder, an engineer, or somewhere in between, what I figured out as I did all this is you need a pretty typical process that all the PMs in the world are going to laugh and go, you don't know that? What's wrong with you? But it turns out when you are the only developer, or you're the solo founder, you're wearing all these hats. So you do have to do all of it. And so I came up with this simple 3-file system. It's called AI Dev Tools, and it's an open source repo on GitHub. And it's 3 markdown files. And it's basically 3 prompts, right? And what I figured out is, okay, if you want to build something, whether it's the whole app or just a feature of the app, you of course have to create a PRD, a product requirement doc. And again, it's like, duh. But a lot of people don't know this, right? So what I do is I have this file, you just tag it, at, and then you tag the file name. And then I now use Whisperflow, and I'm not an investor. I'm not being paid to say that, but I click the Alt key on my keyboard and I just start blabbing about this feature and everything about it. And then I tag this file called create PRD, and then the model goes to work. And the prompt is basically like, okay, take the user's requirements, ask them 5 clarifying questions, and then once you get the answer, then build out a pretty typical PRD. Great, you got a PRD. Now you specify a lot of things, but now what? So then the second file is called generate tasks, and so you tag the PRD, you tag the generate task file, and you hit go on the agent. And the prompt is pretty simple. Look at this PRD, pretend that you're translating it for a junior developer, break it down as tasks, make every task atomic, use dot notation, put a list of the files that you think you're going to need to add at the top, and then say, go. And then there's the third one, which is iterate in the task, which is do one task at a time, ask for permissions that when you don't understand things. And that process, like, believe it or not, most people don't do or understand or have the discipline to run. But when you do, you can build big features, pretty reliably. And so anyways, I open source that, and it's got like 4,000 stars on GitHub.
I mean, I haven't even told you, like, I use it. I haven't started. So, but yeah, no, it's been successful. Like, my version, I'm not trying to start a company on the side, but my Untangled is like, my wife homeschools our kids, and she's always looking for like supplemental help. But if we just give them ChatGPT, they're young, who knows what kind of bad things happen, including they just ask for the answers. And so, I've been building an agent for them to ask for homework help that will coach them. It's been a good way to dog food free play. But yeah, it's like I used your files, and it's been very helpful. So thank you. Nice work.
No problem. I'm surprised at how popular it was. It was just, and what's interesting is everyone I talked to has evolved to the same point independently, because we realize the models have this capability, but they need to be, steered. Yep. And this is a version of the way to do it.
Today, this will date us whenever we're recording this show versus publishing it, but OpenAI released agents.md today. And, it's same kind of idea.
And that actually is interesting, because I actually shipped our support of agents.md, merged the PR last night, because it's one of these things, like, we need these standards to develop, and we shouldn't have a cursor rules file and an amp.md, and it's just terrible for devs. So it's exciting to see. Cursor's adopt it, OpenAI's adopt it, Amp's adopt it, Jules, which is made by Google, has adopted it. So we're seeing that stuff start to happen.
That's cool. So like, we're down the road, you're building Amp. It's a good sense of like what you all are up to and thinking about, and like where you've come from. And it's like, you're getting to do this awesome work, educating people. I want to talk a little bit about like how you're actually building Amp, because I think people on listen to this show will both be interested in like, how can I use it, and what are some of your practices, and they'll go download some of your files, but then also like, what's happening over there under the hood. I guess like maybe an interesting place to start for people that aren't working on coding agents, but just, maybe curious, like, what has living in Amp taught you that like is actually helping make the product better? Like, what are you seeing that the dev team building it are just not naturally seeing otherwise?
So the unique thing that thankfully I'm bringing to the table is that I'm building a product outside of Amp, right? So I come in as a developer who's using Amp, but on a different code base. Because surprise, we use Amp to build Amp, just like the Cursor team uses Cursor to build Cursor, like it's recursive, right? And so I'm coming in, with a fresh code base that does different things. And so, I start to see some of the holes in the DX, like, hey, this is weird. Why does it do that? And what's fascinating though, and this is why it's so fun to work in an agent company, is because often I'll see like a small bit of friction with the DX. And then what I can then do is open up AMP on the AMP code base and say, okay, where is that code? And then I can figure out, git blame or just ask AMP who worked on it. And then I can ping them and say, hey, I'm thinking about, shipping something, what do you think? And they'll say, sure. And then you create a PR and then merge it and fix it. But I will be blunt. And this is something we try to do a lot of at AMP, is say there is no moat here. So before I joined the team, Byong and Quinn, the two co-founders, and Torsten, the lead dev, recorded a podcast, and I think the title was "There Is No Moat," and then Torsten, published a blog post which is like, this is literally the code to write an agent. It's 300 lines. This is not a secret. And so I think what's happening is all of us who are trying to build agents specific for coding, if we're being honest, we're saying there is no moat, right? We basically we call the API, we have, custom system prompts, and then there is thousands of hours of what we call elbow grease, right? It's just a grind, right? Like shaving off this bit of friction for DX. All right. Tune in the prompt to do this. Like, it's a total grind. And I don't think there's any other way to be, truthful about it than that. Now, how does this get into evals? And like, how do we actually know whether AMP is performing?
Yeah, I'd love to hear, like, how do you know as the owners of AMP, how AMP's performing? How do you think about that, like personally? Like, yeah, what's that look like in your world today?
It's perfect timing because, as I came into the company, GPT-5 dropped. And this causes chaos for everybody, in both good and terrible ways. So one thing about AMP that's very different is there is no model selector. So before I joined, the agent harness had been highly tuned for Sonnet 4 as the primary agent. And then we have what's called the Oracle, which is a tool call, which uses O3. And again, this is not rocket science. We've been very public about this, and anyone who's working on this space will probably have tried something similar. But the team was very opinionated. Okay, we're not going to let people choose O1 Pro as the agent model, and Gemini 2.5 Pro as the O3 model, because every model is like so unique and specific and quirky, right? And so the team had been, very specifically tuning AMP for Sonnet 4 and O3. And now there's a new model. And so it's like, how do we even, because a lot of the tuning of AMP for Sonnet 4 and O3 is through elbow grease. And I want to be very transparent and say, we do not have a set of evals that we programmatically run to decide if GPT-5 is better than Sonnet 4 yet. And that may sound bad and confusing and surprising, but everybody who is in the trenches building these agentic coding tools understands that it is so dynamic and so frustrating, to come up with, a set of quantitative, qualitative evals that we trust. Now we're working on it, and we're building these, and this is why I could talk to you for days about evals. But that's the truth of it. Now, what we're trying to build out is basically tasks that we believe represent the typical developer workflow. And, how does GPT-5 compare to that? But then, as you know, like GPT-5 is highly steerable. It probably is the best instruction follower model in the world.
For better or worse.
Right. And so then it's highly, highly, sensitive to the system prompt, right? And so I guess I'm trying to say it's hard. And I wish that there was a magic bullet. But we have an active group, that we are talking to OpenAI with about, building out a set of evals that we really feel good about. But it's hard. It's like building on quicksand. You're just changing every 2 hours.
That's the promise on the eval side. You all face so much complexity with just different workflows, different coding languages, code bases, problems to solve. Like you're kind of doing them all. And I've talked to the people building coding agents that face the same thing. It's like, you end up with one happy path, complicated task to just like, can we make that work? Right. Just go after that.
You can try. I mean, but it's interesting because clearly we want to test tool calling. Tool calling is one of the most important parts, of the agent harness. So, and you can test for these things. But it's one of these things we're actively developing it. We have a head of models that thinks about this all day, that's working on it. I just had a meeting with OpenAI this morning. But then you have this weird relationship where it's like, well, labs like Anthropic and labs like OpenAI want companies like AMP to come out on launch day saying we support their model. But that's very problematic, right? Because if we truly care about our developers, why would we do that? Like, in the end, we need to say, we don't know if we support GPT-5 yet, which is literally where we're at right now. You can try it if you run on the command line by doing amp --try GPT-5, and you can try it. But we don't know if it's the best. Yeah, it's like there's some things I don't like about it, right?
If it's not through some like structured set of evals, and by the way, like I really appreciate the transparency. I think a lot of people watching this show will as well, because I think a lot of folks like are talking about evals and not as many are doing it as, probably feel like they should. So, it's just cool that you're being honest about it. I think that maybe like a higher level question then is like, so say it's not super well structured evals yet that cover like a wide range of use cases at scale. How do you think about just like the feedback loop more generally? Like what does that look like?
Well, I mean, there's three metrics that clearly matter, right? You have price. This is a factor because we basically pass on the token cost to our customers, right? And so we want to give our customers the best, price per token, per quality, per performance metric, right? That's a moving target. But so we clearly care about price. And the amazing thing, GPT-5 is more affordable. So we would absolutely switch to it in a second if we felt that it was truly the right model right now. So price is pretty straightforward, and that's actually easy to measure. And we do. And then performance is also easy to measure. Like literally how much latency is there in, what is time to first token? These are things we can measure, and that's pretty easy, and we do. But quality, so quality is the problem, right? What is quality, right? And, if you tell the model to run a bash command and it doesn't do it, that might be great. And if it does do it, it might be great, right? And it comes down to very much what the developer expects to happen. So we do have some qualitative evals we do run. I'm just trying to be transparent and honest and say, we don't know if they're the right ones. We don't know if they are representative or useful. And we talk to all the agent companies and they don't either. So I think that's kind of the dirty secret is like all of it is dev vibes, like really. Once you get past price and performance, the quality metrics is very much a moving target.
Is there an example? Like if it's all too proprietary, don't share. But like, yeah, I'm just curious if you're saying like, oh, this is a thing where we're trying to figure out, we think it's quality, we're not sure.
A couple of things. Like you could look at things like distribution of tool calls. Like when is this happening during the conversation? How often is it happening? How often are these tool calls failing, right? How often is the developer asking clarifying questions or saying they're frustrated, right? These are all measurable, right? So that's one thing. Order of tool calls. What is, we could, for instance, have an eval with an expected happy path for tool call, right? And we can measure against it, right? And we do. What about error rates on tool calls? Okay, that matters a lot. How often is the model getting basic tool calls right? Average message count per thread. Like AMP, we love this thing where we allow people to share their threads so you can actually see how people talk to the models. You can do a lot with that. Context window consumption, right? How much are people using? You can start to hear how complex it is. Well, I remember when I joined, I was like, we don't have a golden set of evals. Like, what is happening? Like, and they're like, okay, Ryan, just work here for 2 weeks. And
see how hard it is.
Well, then, and that's not an excuse,
Yeah.
but it is context. And I think we'll all get there. And this is what's so fun about free play. I mean, this is your business. It's like, how do you help people figure this out? And this is why it's such an exciting space to be in. It should be, there should be clear evals, but we're all not quite there yet.
Because we get to do this a lot with a lot of companies, right? We could almost like draw this, I'm sure there's some curve that maps to this that's been written about in sociology, right? But there's like some, trough of despair thing that kind of happens where I think so many people get into the question and then they realize that like, well, this is like, how do I describe quality in this, very multivariant scenario with hundreds of thousands or maybe millions of customers? And I start to pull at that thread, and it's like you can sit in a room and whiteboard it, and we've seen a lot of people do this, right? Like there's a lot of PMs that'll sit down and just, be like, these are what the evals should be. And then, those may or may not correlate to customer value directly. They may or may not correlate to actionable things that the engineering team can go fix, or whoever's doing prompt engineering can go fix, or, that you really are going to make a decision. Are we going to ship this or not based on that metric? Like maybe, I don't know. And so there's this kind of like vibe thing on the path to discovering what the evals should be. And I think increasingly, like, current state of the market, this moment in 2025, like our mindset is just like, don't have that mindset. It's not so much of a thing that people are likely to arrive at as it is that you're going to get to a place where you say, these are functional in that, we will make decisions based on them. We know that if we pay attention to them, there's a positive correlation to customer experience. And, if you go hill climb one of those evals and it's relatively solved and the state of the art models evolve, maybe it's irrelevant. And like the next thing emerges and your evals kind of evolve too. Right. And so I think this is part of what, it's like this very recursive problem. But it's like what you're describing is not dissimilar to what I think we see even outside of code agent, eval scenarios.
Which makes sense. It's almost as if the entire human race is now fitting to evals. And all of this has been in our head or various versions of documentation. And we couldn't systematically run these things, right? And now we can. So it's sort of like, oh, wow, okay, yeah. How do you eval developer experience, right? That's what we do. Now, another one of your companies, needs to eval customer support experience or, healthcare experience. Like, and it's all in people's heads or documents are spread out. And so it's a fun problem to solve. And, I don't want to give your listeners and viewers the impression we don't know how to eval. It's more, how do you do this in a way that is small enough that works, but large enough to make a difference? We're also kind of weird because all of us are developers. So you actually are your own customer, whereas a lot of times you're not. So we can get away with vibe evals more, but not definitively and not forever.
Because you described it as like, we're talking to all these other coding agent companies that are all in the same place. It's like, you kind of just know. We've had, Nathan Sobo from Zed on the show. He kind of said similar stuff, right? Like, developer building is IDE. And I think this is one of the things I've reflected on. It's like, this has all been inside the human computer, right? Like it's all in our brains. We have this amazing ability, combination of like judgment, discernment, taste, to just look at a thing and like make a million snap judgments. And now we're having to externalize that into software and say, okay, what is all the judgments I just made? But yeah, I mean, to your point, I think like this comes back to, and it's good that you say it, right? It's like not tactically, it's not like you don't know how to do evals. Like, measuring stuff is not actually the hard part here, but what are you actually going to make decisions off of and what matters? And you could very easily over instrument evals and not have a lot to show for it.
You could. I mean, and I think what's also interesting is that all of us are realizing that evaluating models has similarities to evaluating employees. There's this judgment you do as a manager. And the problem is like, most managers aren't good managers, but the good ones have figured out a rubric, right? Of how do you actually evaluate a human on their job. And ironically, those people are probably the best at actually booting up, the beginning of evals, because they can, like you said, externalize it. And we're just in a place where we've never had to do that before. And it's both wonderful and also like daunting.
Maybe like to turn a little bit, but key off of that. Like there's a lot that's wonderful and daunting right now. Put your founder hat on, like just curious to hear you reflect. Like you've done this a bunch of times. You were starting companies back, I think I first came to one of your Future of Web Apps events in like 2007 or something. So it's been a while. And like, what's different starting something today when you're trying to build Untangled, versus like when you did things before? Like, what's it causing you to do differently as a founder?
I was actually talking to Jill, my wife, about this. There is a very clear line being drawn across the world between people that have agency and those that do not. Because what I observe now is like, well, why could I start Untangle by myself? Right. And it's because, for some reason, the way I was raised, my environment, the people around me, I have agency. And to define agency, just because it's like the ability to do without being forced. Right. So it's like, I realized like, oh, wow, I can use agents to empower me. And it's like putting on your gauntlet of power. And you realize, whoa, I can do almost anything now. And so what I think a lot about is, okay, in the past, if I needed to hire a CTO or a technical founder, if I needed a COO, to run operations, and I needed HR, take care of the people, if I don't need those roles anymore, what does that mean? And it's both, like I said, exciting and terrifying. This idea of how do we empower more kids, more of the next generation to be agentic themselves? And I think a lot about that. We've both got kids, and, my kids are 17 and 14 now. So they're very much like preparing to launch into the world. And I'm doing everything I can to like empower them to use these tools. But it's I'm both very optimistic and very nervous about the future. But I think if everybody listening to this, it's like, if you can remember every time you have a question, just ask it to an AI first. And that will get you to a place where you're probably unlocking things that you would have been blocked before for either finance reasons or access reasons or time reasons. And so now, what could you do? And I think there's going to be, a lot of folks who aren't augmenting themselves with AI who get laid off and who can't find work. Because all the CEOs realize they just want to hire people that have, augmented themselves with AI. So that's some of the things I think about, both exciting and nerve-wracking. I feel very fortunate to be alive today and to be having these kind of conversations. And I'm grateful for that.
I feel the same way. I know we're going to get close to time. If you had the chance to give like one more bit of advice to a engineer or a PM or a founder who's like building in this space today, lessons learned trying to build over the past couple of years on your own, like what's at the top of the list?
I think the top of the list is ask the agent, right? Consult the Oracle and see how far you can get. Because wow, if I, as a non-technical, it used to be technical founder, ended up shipping literally a real app and a real company, then you can do it too. And don't forget about evals.
Awesome. Thanks for the plug. Ryan, it's been great talking with you. Thanks so much for taking the time. And I'll look forward to the next one.
Thanks. Loved it. Appreciate being here.
All right. That's all we have for today's episode of Deployed, the AI product podcast. I'm Ian Cairns, CEO and co-founder of FreePlay. I hope you enjoyed listening. And if you did, we'd love to hear about it. Your reviews mean a lot. They help other listeners. So give us a like, share, subscribe, wherever you're listening to this. And if something stood out to you in the episode, or if you've got feedback or ideas for a future episode, or if you simply just want to learn more or up to at FreePlay, shoot me a note. I'm Ian at freeplay.ai. You can also find me on Twitter @Cairns. Thanks so much for listening.